Give you the answers for the previous assignment, children. Now, the first main was answer the following. Define climate. The weather pattern taken over a long period of time is called climate. Write any two adaptations of the polar bear to survive in the polar region. It has two thick layers of fur which keep it warm. Its paws are white and large, which help it to walk on the snow. Now you all can write even the other points. Even if you have written the other points, it is okay. I have just given you 2 points here. The next question, how do elephants living in tropical forests adapt itself? The first point, large ears of the elephant help it to keep cool during the warm weather. And the next one, it can the trunk helps it to tear the bark of trees, and also it has a strong sense of smell and nose. Okay, so these are the points that you can write for the elephant. The next one was match the following. Wide and large paws, polar bear. Long and large beak, the toucan. Sticky pads, red-eyed frog. Silver white mane is the beard ape. Now let's begin this session, children. Now the first thing, I'll just give you a small introduction about the earth and the atmosphere. Now all of you know there are so many planets which revolve around the sun, which we believe now we have the 8 planets revolving around the sun, and among them, you know, the earth is the planet which is more suitable for life to exist, right? So there are so many things which make the earth the most suitable place to live on, and one important point which you have to understand there is the presence of the atmosphere. Now this atmosphere is very, very important for life to survive, right? Now what is this atmosphere? This atmosphere is nothing but it is a blanket of gases which surrounds the earth. Okay, it is a blanket of gases which surrounds the earth. Now what does this atmosphere do? One thing that it does is it keeps the climate moderate compared to the other planets. Okay, do you understand? The weather is, or the climate is moderate compared to the other planets. Now if you take, say for example, if you take Saturn or if you take Uranus, all these planets, it's extremely cold where life cannot exist at all, and there are so many other reasons also, but one is the temperature. And you know, the distance of the earth from the sun is such that the temperature is very, very moderate where life can exist. So one thing is the climate is moderate, and the second thing is the atmosphere is such that it protects us from the ultraviolet the ultraviolet rays that come from the sun. So the atmosphere plays a very, very important role for life to exist. Now I spoke to you about the atmosphere, and you know the importance of atmosphere. Now the Earth's atmosphere is made of 5 layers. Okay, the lowest layer is the troposphere, then you have the stratosphere, mesosphere. Above the mesosphere you have the ionosphere, and then you have the exosphere. Now here you just have to understand that we live on the troposphere, and the troposphere is the lowest layer of the atmosphere. The next layer is the stratosphere, and the topmost layer of the stratosphere has the ozone layer. Now this ozone layer protects us from the ultraviolet radiations that come from the sun. Now, you can see the troposphere. This, which is the lowest layer of the atmosphere, is the sphere or is the layer in which all the weather conditions take place. Now, what happens in the troposphere? In the troposphere, the sun evaporates large amounts of water and moisture to other regions in the form of wind. Do you understand? So what it does is it evaporates large amounts of water and moisture is transported to other regions in the form of wind. So as air expands and cools, condensation of water vapor helps in the formation of clouds. Did you understand? So clouds are formed over here. You understand? The air or the whatever, the air which is there in the troposphere gets heated by the sun. This heated air rises up, warm air rises up. So as warm air rises up, the pressure below becomes less. The pressure becomes less, the warm air rises up, and this process goes on happening. Now you would have studied this even in your water cycle. You have already studied about the water cycle, how clouds are formed and how rain is formed. So all these conditions, the formation of rain, formation of winds, everything happens in the troposphere. So did you understand? The troposphere is the lowest layer of the atmosphere. So what happens over here? The air becomes warm. As the air becomes warm, the air rises up. So as the air rises up, what happens? The pressure becomes less. Yes, the pressure becomes less in the region where there is cool air. So that is why as you climb mountains, as you climb up the mountains, the air becomes thinner. So if the air becomes thinner, what happens? The air pressure also decreases with altitude. So since the air becomes thinner as you go higher, what happens? The pressure decreases. So what is this atmosphere made of? Atmosphere is made of air, and this air is a mixture of gases. Now what are the different gases that are present in this atmosphere? So here we have nitrogen, which is 78%, oxygen 21%, argon 0.93%, carbon dioxide 0.03%. So because of the presence of oxygen, we are able to survive, and oxygen is a supporter of combustion, and carbon dioxide of course is required by the plants to prepare food. Now when wind starts moving, when this air starts moving, then this moving air is called wind. So now in this lesson we are going to study about wind, then the different properties of air and how winds are caused. What are the reasons for the formation of winds? Now let's discuss about the properties of air. Now I have just told you that the sun heats the surface of the earth, right? Now because of the heating of the surface of the earth by the sun, winds are formed. Now these properties of air help in the formation of winds. Now let us see the three properties of winds which help in the formation of winds. The first property of air is air exerts pressure. Second property, high speed winds are accompanied by reduced air pressure. The third property, air expands on heating. Now we will discuss this point wise with examples. We'll discuss about each property with examples so that you understand it better. So once you understand these 3 points, then you will understand why winds are formed and how storms are formed, how cyclones are formed. Now the first point, air exerts pressure. Now I'll give you this example so that you understand this. Now this is a very simple example where I fill a can with water and I heat it. And I will allow the water to boil for some time. Now after it boils, I will stop heating the water. Okay. After I stop heating the water, I put a lid tightly on the can. Now after I put a lid tightly on the can I will pour fresh cold water. Are you understanding? So on the can I will pour fresh cold water. Now what do you think happens to the shape of the can? Now the can gets distorted. It gets distorted, meaning the shape of the can changes. Why? That is because as the water is poured over the can, there is, that there is steam in the can because it was very hot, no, and it was boiling. So the steam in the can gets condensed and the pressure inside the can decreases. Are you understanding? So the pressure inside the can decreases. Once the pressure inside the can decreases, what happens to the pressure outside? What happens, or what is the pressure outside the can of the air? It is more. Correct? So since the pressure of the air is more from outside, it causes the distortion of the can. So this, you can take simple cans which you have seen, no, in your soft drinks, you have those cans. Those cans can be used, and you don't have to experiment this. Okay. So you just have to understand this, how it gets distorted. So this is because, or this is one thing which shows that air exerts pressure. Now I'll give you a few more examples which helps you understand that air exerts pressure. These are very simple examples. Now when you fly a kite, now most of you would have done it. When there is a wind, it is more easier for you to fly the kite, right? So when you fly this kite, the wind which is coming from the back will help you. Yes or no? So it will help you to fly the kite higher because the air is exerting pressure over there. Then similarly, if you're in a boat, okay, and if you're going in a boat, and if there is a wind, and the wind should not be the speed should not be very high. So if there is a wind blowing, then it is more easier for the person to row the boat. Okay. Then one more example you would have seen is when you ride your bicycle. So when you are riding the bicycle, if the wind is blowing just in front of you or against you, it will be difficult for you to ride the bicycle because the air is exerting pressure on you, right? But same way, if there is a wind which is blowing behind you, then maybe you will find it more easier to ride the bicycle. So please understand this concept that air exerts pressure. I have given you examples to understand. Now children, I'll explain this concept of air expands on heating with a simple experiment. It's a very simple experiment which you can understand how air expands on heating. Now for this, what you have to do is you take a boiling tube, okay, and to this tube you stretch a balloon tightly over its neck, and then you can use a tape. You can see that red color balloon, right? So around that you can just put a tape so that it remains tight. Then you take a beaker. Okay. In the beaker you take hot water. Then you insert the boiling tube with the balloon in the hot water, and you'll observe this for 2 to 3 minutes. You will see that there is a change in the shape of the balloon. The balloon gets inflated. Okay. Now you take out the tube and allow it to cool for some time. And then you take some ice cold water in another beaker and place the tube with the balloon in the cold water for 2 to 3 minutes. Now you observe the change in the shape of the balloon. What do you think will happen? Okay. Now in the balloon, that is the balloon which is kept in the boiled water, gets inflated. Why does it get inflated? This is because air expands on heating and occupies more space, and the balloon gets inflated. Are you understanding? So because there is expansion of air inside the tube, because there is hot water inside, so inside that tube, inside the boiling tube, the water gets heated, it starts to expand, it will have to occupy more space. So the balloon gets inflated. Now when you look at the balloon in the cold water, it remains deflated because there is no expansion of air in the beaker which has cold water. So very simple. Did you understand this? So air expands on heating. Now keeping all these concepts in mind, let us talk about the movement of air. Now when we say movement of air, it is nothing but wind, right? So always air moves from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure. First thing you should understand. Okay. So air from high pressure zone rushes towards the low pressure zone to fill that gap over there. Thus, greater is the pressure difference, greater will be the speed of wind, and vice versa. Now what causes this movement of wind? Okay, so please understand this. Pressure difference in the air is caused by differential heating. Differential heating, some places become very hot, some places become very cold, some places are just moderate. Yes, so because of this there is pressure difference in the air. So once there is pressure difference, what happens? Warm air, when the air becomes warm, it rises up because it becomes lighter. So warm air rises up, it expands, it becomes lighter. Now what happens there when it is rising up? It will create an area of low pressure below the rising air. So that area becomes an area of low pressure, and this area of low pressure is filled by the cooler air from around. Did you understand? That is how this wind movement is created on the earth. So this difference in heating of air creates pressure difference. So once there is pressure difference caused, what happens? The wind movement takes place. So did you understand why there is movement of air? The movement of air is there only because there is a difference in pressure. So when there is difference in pressure, so the wind starts to move. Movement of air because of uneven heating on the earth. Now all of us know that regions which are very close to the equator get maximum heat from the sun throughout the year. You all know this. So we have learned this even in the last chapter. Now what happens because of this? Due to this, what happens? The air near the equatorial region gets heated up. So when the air gets heated up, the warm air will start rising up because it becomes lighter. It starts rising up, and as it rises up, the area below that air it has created an area of low pressure. So now what happens? The cooler air from the higher latitudes, that is from 0 to 23 degrees, you have that place, that region there. So till there, the cool air from there comes to the equatorial region. So the cooler air comes from the other regions and fills the gap, and there is wind movement. Now similarly, it also happens in the temperate zones. Now in the temperate zones, when the air becomes warm, the air rises up, okay, and it creates an area of low pressure. So when it creates an area of low pressure, what happens? We have the polar region. Now in the polar region, we have cold winds. These cold, cooler winds blow towards the temperate zone and it fills in that gap over there. So what happens over here again? There is movement of air. So movement of air occurs because there is a difference in pressure that is created by the movement of warm air. So did you understand this, children? So movement of air takes place because of uneven heating on the earth. Now the second reason, movement of air because of uneven heating of land and water. Now this concept is already studied, but just understand this here again. Now in the coastal areas, the land warms up fast, and it warms up faster than the water. So what happens? Warm air from the land rises up. So as the air rises up, what happens? It will create an area of low pressure. So once it creates an area of low pressure, the wind will start blowing from a region where there is high pressure. So this low pressure area is filled in by the cooler air from the ocean surface. So this gives rise to the sea breeze. So we have the wind blowing from the sea to the land. So we call it the sea breeze. Now we talk about the land breeze. During night, what happens? The land cools down faster than the ocean surface. The warmer air from the ocean surface rises up and creates an area of low pressure near the surface. This is filled by cooler air from the land. So the air blows from the land towards the sea. So we call this the land breeze. So now we have understood the two important reasons why there is movement of air. The first one is uneven heating between the equator and the poles, or uneven heating that takes place on the earth. And the second one, uneven heating of land and water. So because of these two things happening, we have the movement of air which takes place. And this movement of air causes all the storms, the cyclones, the tornadoes, everything to be formed. The flow of moist air from the ocean towards the land is called monsoon. So monsoon usually occurs just after summer season, right? So this word monsoon comes from an Arabic word mawsim, which means seasons. Okay, it means seasons. And if you take the example of the climate in India, so during the summer, the land gets heated up a lot. Say if you take the example of Rajasthan. So Rajasthan is very hot. So there what happens? The warm air rises up. And when the warm air rises up, the cool air from the oceans move towards the move towards Rajasthan, or the cool air from uh, the parts of Kashmir, which is much cooler, moves towards Rajasthan. And that is why we have monsoon. Now this uh, wind carries lot of moisture in it, and this wind brings in rain. Okay, so monsoon winds carry water vapor which falls over the land in the form of rain after cooling down. And this is the harvest season in India. That is, the monsoon season is the harvest season. So people start growing their crops once the rains begin. Now let us just summarize the important points that we have understood in this lesson. The first point, air around us exerts pressure. Air expands on heating and contracts on cooling. Warm air rises up. As warm air rises up, air pressure at that place is reduced and cooler air moves to that place. Moving air is called wind. Uneven heating on the earth is the main cause of wind movement. Winds carrying water vapor, or when they carry lot of moisture, they bring rain, and then the monsoon begins. Now try to answer these questions, children. Fill in the blanks. Wind is dash air. Winds are generated due to dash heating on the earth. Air moves from a region of dash pressure to a region of dash pressure. Answer the following. Write any two properties of air. How are land breeze caused? Now try to write the answers for the questions and the fill in the blanks and complete it. Thank you, children.